Hey there, welcome to the Good Life podcast. It's so good to have you join us. What this is the teachings from our Sunday gatherings here at Good Life on the Sunshine Coast. So I really hope you enjoy what we have to share this week.
Well, good morning. Thanks for being here today. As Sarah mentioned, I was kind of hurt feeling because so many people are away and they've left me here to hold down the fort. We've got Mike with this away with the trip in Indonesia. We've got half our exec team riding the Pyrenees. And to be honest, I feel like a teenager, left at home alone. But with all the possibilities, to stay up all night with the youthies, no thanks, have a party, all this nervous energy pulsing through my body, knowing I'm not being watched. But alas, my mum is here. But alas, people think that I'd be one to push the boundaries. But you'd be wrong. In fact, I love a rule. Mum might disagree with this, but it's true. I even follow all the made-up rules, the social rules. There's other people out there who would probably agree with me. Those unspoken things about, the unsaid things that people should behave by, I believe. I follow them too. Just things we create in our heads. My wife, however, everyone thinks she's the good girl. She's not. She's a rule breaker, a bad girl. She likes to drive slowly in the overtaking lane. I know. I've got no time for that. She likes to use hotel facilities, and we're not staying there. True story. I can't deal. I'm so stressed. She'll send food back at restaurants. I can't do that. I'm just like, how is it? Good. It's disgusting. Of course, I don't say that. That's internal. That'd break a rule. Sarah likes brushing her teeth with the tap running the whole time. I know. Appalling. Things I would never do. I love a rule. And in light of that, as Mike went away and left me here alone, I said, mate, okay, happy to speak. Just give me a topic. Give me some structure. Just make it really clear, simple, straightforward. Don't leave it open, or I'll just get lost, confused, and emotional. So anyway, here's the text message he sent me. It's coming up on the screen. You are now officially the teacher for 22nd of September. That's what he meant. Topic of your choice. Mate, are you not listening to me? If stuck, this is like his fine print, I asked, I said, don't give me nothing, please, just something, some structure. What you've been learning about God, faith, life, family, or whatever. Yeah, right. Thanks heaps, Mike. I'm not sure that counts as a topic. You have fun in Indo. Obviously, you're already there. Now, despite this unhelpful suggestion from Mike Hardy, he is actually a good guy, and I've forgiven him for that. I'm not sure if it was referenced in the morning service last week or whether it was just at night, but Mike was feeling a little bit insecure. Poor little guy. He had become aware that both Ryan and I, during our Practicing the Way series, had quoted Stephen Jeffs and not him. And he was feeling a little bit sensitive. So something I have actually learnt, not lately, but from a very young age, is it's wise to stay in the good books with your boss. So, I would like to begin by quoting the one and only Michael Hardy. If you're watching this, so much love. So recently in week 3 of the Practicing the Way series, there it is, and I even put his name in gold, just so you wouldn't miss it. We're looking at formation, and Mike encouraged us to pray these 2 prayers and ask the Holy Spirit each and every day, what are you trying to teach me at the moment? What do you want me to do? And I guess this is a kind of a similar question to the one he left me to talk on today. Maybe a little bit narrower, but maybe that was something a lens I put on it. So being the good employee of Mike, you're welcome, and the good church attendee, like I hope all of you are, I actually committed to praying that prayer every day for the following week. Anyway, I hope that this was a life-giving experience for all of you, and I hope it changed and God spoke to you, but I personally was a little bit disappointed. Unfortunately for me at the time, and future Greg, who's having to talk on the topic right here and now, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't really get any clear vision I didn't have this thundering voice from heaven and this incredible revelation. Look, I'm as disappointed as you. I felt quite flat and a little bit discouraged. I think I had some nervous expectation as I prayed it that week, being so intentional and being so consistent every day for a week. I mean, that's amazing. But I didn't really have, that voice. I didn't really have any clarity in thought. And I felt a little bit flat. But as I reflected after that experience, and despite the feeling in that week, I actually have a deep belief that we have a God who waits for us, a God who desires relationship with us deeply, a God who does speak to us. Here's just 2 verses that jumped out at me reflecting on that truth. In Revelation, it says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." God waits for us. He desires relationship with us. If you think about a meal, sharing a meal together, there's intimacy, there's closeness in that. And I love this one from James. It says, "Come close to God, and God will come close to you." There's these promises here. Now, as I reflected on this week, I realized that maybe my lens of God's voice and his reply had maybe narrowed a little bit. And maybe it's my tendency, I don't know about you, but I tend to kind of compartmentalize my life. I have a couple of different roles at the moment, so I kind of put them in boxes. And I didn't feel God in those specific moments, those devotionals, those prayer times. But I reflected on what Ryan shared 2 weeks ago, and he said that God is a holistic God. God is interested in our whole lives and speaks to us through creation, through sourdough and warm butter, if you're here when Ryan shared. Amen to that. Community, this community, so many communities, friends, families. And I often need to just shift my lens of what God's voice might look like. There hasn't been much swell lately, but I think getting in nature for me has been something that I often experience God the most closely. I love this psalm. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the earth." So I think we've got to keep, or I do, I've got to keep my lens of what God's voice and how he speaks to me. I need to broaden it and keep considering God as this holistic God, God who's interested in all aspects of my life. Dr. Tanya Harris, who shared here earlier in the year about hearing the voice of God, she shared discerning God's voice and how it always aligns with his nature. So if we want to determine whether it's God's voice, we've got to think about the nature of God. And God's voice is always going to promote peace, hope, freedom. It's never going to be about shame and guilt. And Jesus was here in John 3:17, after that famous one, he says, "I came to help, to set things right again." And that's God's voice, is this voice of encouragement, this voice of love. And when I broadened my lens, and as I considered and I started to reflect in preparation for this message, I started to see God, and I started to understand what he was maybe saying to me in this season right now. We actually, my family and I, just returned from the Gold Coast. We shot down there for a couple of nights. We took my son away to celebrate his 17th birthday. I think I've got a photo here. This is just taken the other day. He's 17 and he likes to dominate me in photos now, so he puts his arm like over my shoulder to make me feel really small. What a jerk. Anyway, I choose to love him in those moments. And you can see I'm fighting back for my masculinity. And anyway, Sarah, my rule-breaking wife, is actually really amazing at being intentional about celebrating, creating memories for our family. So she's the one, I give her full credit for planning this little getaway. And Sarah and I, in preparation for this 17th birthday, we've been chatting a lot about this next stage of life for having an adult son. He's just 1 year away from that 18-year-old magic number where apparently all of a sudden you're an adult and you can do all those adult things. We'll see. But for those of you who don't know, just like my wife, I was a primary school teacher for many years, close to 18 years. And I think that shapes you. You become quite firm, quite direct, quite controlling. And when I say that out loud, it sounds negative, but actually, if you're dealing with 25 little animals on a Friday afternoon, it helps to be direct, firm, and controlling, right, teachers? Yeah, thank you. It's kind of necessary. It goes in the territory. Anyway, I feel like this experience has had a huge impact on my life and potentially on my parenting style. I think it's mostly served me well, especially for my two great kids who graciously forgive my direct, controlling ways. But now my son is almost an adult. And over the next year, Sarah and I are chatting heaps about, like, what are the conversations we need to be having? What are the ways we need to be stepping back as we prepare him to be making his own decisions, to be fending for himself? We have to slowly release or more specifically, my grip on his life. And it scares me a lot. It makes me really nervous. But as I reflected on that, I actually don't want to be driven by my fear, my insecurity, my nervousness to control him. I actually want to be confident in him. And I want to be loving and supportive and encouraging. I actually need to be ready that he is going to make lots of mistakes. He's going to probably hurt me, hurt his mother, the best woman in the world, hurt his friends, even hurt himself. And I just need to be there for him, ready to love him, ready to forgive him, ready to actually accept him as he is, not as I want him to be. And I don't always get this right as a parent, but I love the metaphor of God as a parent, as a good father. And I think, for me, that resonates in this season of my life in particular. And while there's limits to any metaphor describing God, I think it's the best way we can start to understand who he is. I think it highlights God as a parent who doesn't try and control or micromanage us. I would actually love to follow my children around all day and micromanage their lives. Shut the drawer, flush the toilet, put that away. The dirty clothes bins are right there. But actually, I think loving someone means to let go. It actually means not speaking so often. A loving parent actually gives autonomy to their child, helping them navigate uncertainty for themselves. And I think this metaphor actually sits really well with this idea of God who doesn't demand, doesn't direct, doesn't control us, but a God who leaves space, a God who invites us to make decisions ourselves, to utilize the wisdom that he's given us, to utilize the community of people around us. So I think hearing God's voice is about partnership rather than control, fostering a relational dynamic of faith. And I know deep down, like I'm sure we all do, that we cannot let our emotions or our circumstance determine the character of God. I'm sure you're confronted with that every week you come to church on a Sunday and you sing those words in those hymns. And you couldn't actually sing them without actually believing that our circumstances, our feelings can't determine the goodness of God, the character of God. God's above and beyond those. And as I reflected again in preparation to share today about what God's been teaching me and trying to broaden my lens, I was reminded of a time here at Good Life Church where we actually went through a difficult season as a community. there were some huge challenges facing our church as the building expanded and staff turnover and burnout and lots of different things. And during that time, we actually referenced this quite a lot, this story of Abraham and this desert season. So let me give you a little bit of context. So in Genesis 12, first couple of verses, we see that God speaks to Abraham and talks to him about this promise. And the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." So Abram receives this word from God and steps out. This promise to be a great nation. Now, key in this was this idea of becoming a great nation, you had to have kids, and Abram didn't have any. And it wasn't until 25 years later that Isaac was in fact born, that this promise came through to fulfillment. And I remember in this season of Good Life, we kept referencing this desert season, these 25 years that Abraham felt, God's told me this promise is coming, but I can't feel that here and now. Now, at this time, having a family was super important. Having children in particular. Boys were essential for supporting the family and continuing the family name, because apparently girls aren't important in this process. That's sarcasm. Anyway, if you keep reading, we see that this is finally fulfilled, and this long time of wait in uncertainty. I'm sure that Abram in this time, he didn't think his circumstances reflected God's promise. I'm sure he didn't feel like a great nation. I don't feel like he had a great name throughout the world or the nation. He didn't really feel like a blessing. He didn't have a big family. So I'm sure his circumstances and his emotions didn't line up with who he knew God to be and God's promise to him. So I think how do we navigate desert times in our lives? What's our lesson for us today? How do we stay true to knowing who God is despite how we feel, despite the circumstances and the hardships we face in life? Because we all go through them. And again, I reflected and I tried to broaden my lens and look at holistically. And I reflected on what I'm actually learning at university at the moment. I'm studying psychology, and I've been learning about this approach called acceptance and commitment therapy. And while I only have a pretty simple understanding while I'm still learning, so any psychologist or counselors in the space, may God be teaching you empathy and kindness while I explain. But a basic summary is that it focuses on accepting our thoughts and emotions. So not trying to reject them. However you're feeling and thinking is okay, accept those. But actually encourage us to hold them at a distance. And remember that we're not defined by our thoughts and feelings and our circumstances. Because thoughts and feelings are a beautiful and normal part of the human existence. A life without these emotions would not be human. But it's a reminder that they're passing, they're fleeting, they're temporary. And rather than focusing on them, it's actually, this approach talks about making decisions on our values, focusing on values and moving towards the person we want to be or the person we want to become. An ACT would suggest that if we try and avoid these uncomfortable feelings or emotions, or we try and control them, it'll actually cause more distress. So in the midst of this discouragement I was feeling, I was reminded, and I'm still learning, that despite feeling discouraged and disconnected, I don't want to be defined by them. I don't want them to shape my actions. I actually want to live by my values and stay focused on those. And in acceptance and commitment therapy, it talks about these towards moves. Are you moving towards the person you want to be? Are your actions lined up with your values? And towards moves, go beyond that. So an example might be, when I decide to go cycling, I love telling you about my cycling, which I haven't been doing lately because all my buddies are in the Pyrenees. But when I go cycling, it's always tempting to sleep in, but actually I value my health. So actually that's going to be a commitment for me, and that's when I'm living by my values? Or if I continue to pray that prayer that Mike encouraged me to, despite being discouraged and feeling flat, if I continue to do that and reading the Bible and seeking God, that's living by my values because I actually value relationship with God. I'm not being stopped by how I was feeling at that time. I could stay true to the values that I see. Values are not goals. So I just want to help there. They're not these achievable things. They're actually the guidelines for how we should live our lives. They tell us whether a goal is worth striving for. And Jesus invites us to live like this. He clearly tells us through his teachings and his very life and death to live by one core value, and that's love. Love this passage in 1 John. It says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. So, dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us." And if you think about the life of Jesus, he didn't let his circumstances or his emotions stop him from his mission of living by that value. We reflect on him as he was preparing to go to the cross and die. He said, "Father, let this cup pass from me." He was in his emotional agony as he prepared for that. But he stayed true to that, his value about loving God and loving others. So despite how I'm feeling or my circumstances, am I moving towards love? Are my goals, are my actions about loving God and loving others? So I actually want to pause now as we come to end this service. I don't know about you, but so often after the service, someone will ask me, "How was church today?" I say, "Yeah, it was good." Music? Oh, so good. Loved it. What was the topic? What did you take away? So while I initially hated Mike for it, I want to pose the same question for you this morning. I want us to take time right now to pause and reflect. And the questions will come up here on the screen. And the music team are going to give us some music and some time now where you can pause and think, what are you learning right now? I encourage you, don't be narrow. God is interested in all of your life. Think broadly. What metaphor of God speaks to you right now or resonates with you in this season of your life? How's God speaking to you? What reminds you of God's goodness and calls you on, inspires you? Second question, what are your core values? What values guide your actions? And lastly, and most importantly, are you moving towards love, toward God and toward others? See, God invites us to this better way of living. Does love underpin everything I do? Despite how I'm feeling, despite my circumstances, are my goals about loving God and loving others? Am I living by those values? Let's give you a moment to reflect.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to find more content, you can head to our YouTube channel. If you want to know more about Good Life, you can head to goodlife.org.au. See you next week. Bye.